Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Some women were never meant to be understood, only witnessed. Let that sit with you. Because what if I told you that the most mysterious, self-contained, and emotionally bulletproof type of woman doesn't just appear out of thin air? She's either wired differently from birth or built in the dark by circumstances so raw they'd break most people in half. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Sigma females don't evolve like the rest. They're not molded by trends, guided by mentors, or shaped by social scripts. They're either born as psychological anomalies or made by brutal emotional boot camps that strip everything fake away, no in between. And no, you can't become one just by reading quotes on Instagram and buying a black leather jacket. In fact, a 2021 study from the University of Copenhagen found that people with extreme independence traits often show neurodevelopmental and trauma-linked patterns, suggesting this isn't just personality, it's deep neurological and emotional architecture. So the big question isn't, can anyone become a Sigma female? It's actually this. What does life have to do to you, or who do you have to be born as, to walk through this world without ever needing a tribe? Stick around, because what you're about to hear isn't what you've been told. It's not girl boss fiction. It's not personality test fluff. This is raw psychological warfare, identity architecture, and a few hard-hitting truths, with a sprinkle of dry humor so we both survive it. Let's get into it. Number 1. They are born as blueprints. Life either activates or destroys it. Not every woman who feels out of place in the world is a Sigma female. And not every woman who's strong, silent, or independent fits the mold. There's a blueprint, yes. But that blueprint needs to be activated, and that only happens when life either breaks her or forges her. That's what sets Sigma females apart. They're not built through choice or trend. They emerge when everything false, weak, or performative is stripped away, either by circumstance or sheer internal refusal to conform. Some are born with it buried deep in their wiring, that quiet intensity, that disinterest in fitting in, that relentless pull toward solitude, truth, and independence. But for many, that code never gets unlocked. Life pushes them into roles, personas, systems that dull the signal. They get absorbed by the noise, they compromise, they adapt. The potential was there, but it never activated. And then there are the rare ones, the ones who had the blueprint and survived the ignition process. Life didn't just challenge them, it detonated everything around them. Trust was broken. Safety was a myth. They were left to figure it out alone, emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically. And in that space, without anyone to save them or soften it, they built themselves, not by design, but because there was no other option. That's why Sigma females are not better. They're just different. Their identity is not chosen. It's revealed when everything that isn't truly them gets burned away. Some might see it as strength, but what most people miss is that it came at a cost. Loneliness, emotional exile, endless self-questioning. And yet, they didn't collapse into victimhood or performance. They hardened, not in bitterness, but in clarity. So, no, Sigma females aren't made the way you make a career plan, and they're not always born complete either. They're a rare hybrid, part nature, part destruction, and part defiance that refuses to die. And that's what makes them almost mythical, because very few make it through that process and come out whole. Number 2, they don't adapt, they withhold. Most people, when faced with social pressure, bend just enough to be accepted, just enough to avoid standing out too much. They smooth their edges, laugh when it's not funny, agree when they're unsure, and shape-shift their identity to match the room. It's called adapting, and it's a survival skill most learn early. But Sigma females move in the opposite direction. When the environment demands conformity, they don't lean in, they pull back. They don't do this to be mysterious or rebellious. They do it because adapting for them feels like betrayal, not of others, but of themselves. It's not about being stubborn or antisocial. It's about instinctively knowing that every time they shrink, soften, or twist their truth to make others more comfortable, they lose a piece of their core. And once that erosion begins, it's hard to stop. So they don't allow it to start at all. Withholding becomes their way of preserving who they are. It's not coldness, it's containment. If a room, a relationship, or a conversation doesn't feel authentic, they'll withdraw, not out of fear, but out of self-respect. They'd rather be misunderstood than misrepresented. They'd rather walk alone in silence than speak in a voice that doesn't sound like theirs. This isn't something they learned from a book. It's a deep, intuitive mechanism they've used to survive environments where being too real, too smart, or too self-possessed made them a threat. So instead of adapting, they observed, they studied, and then they detached. To some, it comes off as arrogance or aloofness. But the truth is, it's discipline, it's self-preservation. It's the refusal to let their essence be diluted for the sake of comfort or approval. While others bend to belong, Sigma females remain still, not because they don't care, but because they care too much about staying whole. Number 3. Their silence isn't shyness, it's precision. People often misunderstand silence. They assume it means insecurity, awkwardness, or social anxiety, especially when it comes from a woman. If she isn't loud, bubbly, or constantly engaging, she's quickly labeled as shy, or worse, cold. But when a Sigma female is quiet, it's not because she's afraid to speak or unsure of herself, it's because she chooses to speak only when it actually matters. This is not a woman who fills silence for the sake of comfort. She doesn't babble to impress. She doesn't feel the need to prove her worth through words. Her silence is not rooted in fear, it's rooted in clarity. She's scanning, observing, dissecting, not the room itself, but the energy of the people in it. She watches how people carry themselves, what they don't say, the micro-expressions between the sentences. While others rush to be heard, she listens to what's not being said. That kind of restraint, true restraint, is rare. It's not something you can practice into perfection. It comes from having a mind that values truth over performance. It comes from knowing that words, once spoken, can't be taken back, and that not everyone is worth your inner thoughts. Her silence is selective, it's protective, it's surgical. And when she does speak, it lands like a blade, because every word has weight. She doesn't speak to entertain or placate. She speaks when something needs to be said, and when she does, people pay attention. Not because she demands it, but because her energy commands it. Her silence is not the absence of personality, it's the refusal to dilute it. That's why people so often misread Sigma females. They expect noise, they expect performance. But what they get instead is presence, stillness, precision. And for those who thrive on superficiality, that's intimidating. Because a woman who doesn't need to speak to be powerful is one you can't predict, manipulate, or fully understand. Her silence isn't emptiness. It's full of thought, of boundaries, of awareness. And unlike shyness, it doesn't hide, it reveals, just not in ways most people are trained to see. Number 4. They don't fit in, but they're not meant to be outcasts either. Sigma females exist in a strange, in-between space that most people can't categorize. They don't fit into the mainstream, but they are not actively rebelling against it either. They're not trying to be different. They are different, and not in a curated, trendy, attention-seeking way. It's a natural, often uncomfortable disconnection from the usual human systems. Groups, hierarchies, cliques, roles. They walk parallel to the crowd, never quite inside it, but not trying to destroy it either. That's what makes their identity so complex, and so misunderstood. They're not misfits in the traditional sense. Misfits usually long for acceptance and are bitter about not receiving it. Sigma females? They stopped expecting it a long time ago. And they're not rebels either, because rebels often need an audience. They need something to push against. But Sigma females don't need to prove anything. They don't fight the system to make a point. They just opt out of it quietly. This middle ground existence becomes both a burden and a superpower. It's not something they were taught, it's something they grew into, often out of necessity. Early in life, many of them tried to fit in. They tried to play along, play nice, play dumb, but something in them always snapped. Pretending drained them. Belonging came with too many rules, too many masks, too many quiet sacrifices of self. So they stepped out, but not in anger, just in realization, and once they left, they didn't find a new tribe, they found themselves. That doesn't mean they don't feel lonely. It means they value integrity over inclusion. They'd rather stand alone in authenticity than be surrounded in compromise. People often try to label them introvert, loner, too intense, emotionally distant. But the truth is simpler and far more nuanced. They just exist outside the social blueprint most people are conditioned to follow. Their entire way of being is a response to an identity that never found a home in typical spaces. They're not meant to fit, and they don't need to be cast out either. They just are, quietly, fully, and unapologetically in the space between. Number 5, their independence is not empowerment, it's emotional necessity. People love to romanticize independence. It's packaged as empowerment, confidence, boss energy. But for Sigma females, their independence doesn't come from a place of wanting to be strong, it comes from being left with no other choice. It's not something they proudly developed for applause, it's something they had to develop to survive. From an early age, many Sigma females learned a brutal truth. Depending on others often comes with disappointment, manipulation, or betrayal. Whether it was inconsistent parenting, fake friendships, broken promises, or emotional neglect, the message was repeated over and over again. You're on your own. And over time, that message stopped feeling cruel. It just became reality. So they stopped reaching out. They stopped hoping someone else would show up. And instead, they started showing up for themselves. Not because they wanted to prove anything, but because relying on others started to feel more dangerous than isolation. That's not strength, that's emotional necessity. What most people interpret as confidence is often just high-functioning self-protection. The Sigma female pays her own bills, handles her own problems, and keeps her circle small. Not to be impressive, but to stay safe. Letting someone in is a risk she doesn't take lightly. It's not about control, it's about survival. She's been burned, and she remembers the heat. People admire her for being so independent, but they rarely ask why she became that way. Because the answer isn't shiny, it's raw. It's filled with quiet nights where she had to talk herself out of panic, clean up the mess others made, and rebuild her emotional walls from scratch, alone. Yes, she's strong. Yes, she's capable. But her independence is a scar, not a badge. It's the result of too many lessons learned the hard way. So when she moves through life without needing anyone, don't mistake it for pride. It's protection. It's exhaustion. It's the outcome of choosing solitude over false security. She's not trying to be impressive. She's trying to stay intact. And that's a reality most people don't see, because they're too busy clapping for her strength to notice the pain behind it. Number 6. Made by absence, not presence. Most people are shaped by the things they're given. Love, support, encouragement, protection. But Sigma females, they're shaped by what was missing. Not in a poetic, tragic kind of way, but in a brutally real one. The parts of them that people find so intense, so self-contained, so sharply independent, those were carved out by absence, not abundance. They weren't protected when it mattered. They weren't comforted when they were afraid. They weren't validated when their instincts were right. They weren't chosen, heard, or emotionally held. Over time, those voids didn't just become wounds. They became the architecture of how they relate to the world. Not with softness, but with surgical awareness. Not with expectation, but with restraint. This is why Sigma females often come across as emotionally minimalist. They don't need much and they don't expect much. Because expecting requires hope, and hope requires trust. And those things were denied to them early, often, and without apology. So they learned how to live without reassurance, without protection, without emotional cushions. That's what makes their clarity so ruthless. They see through people fast, and they don't get stuck in wishful thinking. They're not cruel. They're just done hoping people will be what they're not. When you've grown up in emotional absence, your radar for authenticity gets painfully sharp. You don't waste time on potential. You either show up real, or you're already forgotten. They're not closed off, but they're not wide open either. They've learned that letting people in comes with a cost. So now, they keep their inner world clean, quiet, and guarded. It's not out of bitterness, it's out of necessity. Because when you've been shaped by the lack of stability, empathy, and protection, you learn that your only reliable home is yourself. So no, Sigma females aren't built by the presence of love, attention, or guidance. They're built by the long, silent stretches where those things should have been, but weren't. And in that emptiness, they developed a selfhood so solid it can no longer be shaken by the world that once forgot them. Number 7, they develop emotional Xray vision. Sigma females have an uncanny ability to read people quickly, quietly, and with brutal accuracy. It's not something they learned from books, psychology podcasts, or self-help seminars. It's something they earned in environments where deception wasn't rare. It was the norm. Where smiles were fake, apologies were manipulative, and words rarely matched actions. And when that becomes your everyday reality, you either learn to see through it, or get emotionally wrecked by it over and over again. They didn't develop this level of discernment for fun. It was survival. When you grow up around people who say one thing and mean another, or who punish truth and reward performance, you start to study behavior like your life depends on it, because sometimes it actually does. Over time, they trained their nervous systems to pick up on the subtlest shifts: tone, body language, micro-expressions, energy changes. They began to see not what someone says, but what they're trying to hide. That's why people often find Sigma females unnerving. You can't lie to them easily. You can't manipulate them with flattery, charm, or theatrics. They'll spot the crack in your mask before you even realize you're wearing one. And once they do, they don't argue, confront, or expose you. They just silently detach. The connection ends, not with a bang, but with a slow fade you didn't even notice starting. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. When you've seen the same lies told in different costumes, you stop giving the benefit of the doubt. You stop romanticizing potential. You start trusting your gut more than someone's words. Their emotional Xray vision isn't always a gift. It can be exhausting. It means they can rarely turn their awareness off. They sense shifts in people's moods, motives, and masks constantly, and it's why they prefer solitude. Because being around dishonesty, even unspoken, feels loud. So no, their intuition isn't spiritual fluff. It's field-tested, trauma-hardened, and brutally efficient. They don't need you to explain who you are. They already know. Number 8. They're hardwired for psychological autonomy. Most people are conditioned from a young age to ask for permission, to wait for approval, to follow the rules set by someone else. But Sigma females come into the world with a very different operating system. Even as children, they didn't want to be led, they wanted to understand. They didn't blindly follow, they questioned. Not to be defiant, but because it never felt natural to surrender their mind to someone else's control. That craving for psychological autonomy wasn't something they were taught. It was how they came wired. This isn't about being a strong-willed child in the typical sense. It's deeper than stubbornness. It's an internal pressure to remain mentally sovereign, even when they don't have the language for it yet. While other kids wanted to be liked or praised, the Sigma female often wanted space. Space to think, to figure things out, to process the world on her own terms. Authority didn't intimidate her, but it didn't impress her either. She never liked being told what to do just because. Rules that didn't make sense to her felt like cages. She wasn't interested in power struggles. She was interested in logic, in fairness, in truth. When a teacher or parent said, "Because I said so," that wasn't an answer. It was an insult to her intelligence. She learned early on that following authority didn't always equal safety, and that obedience sometimes required you to betray your own gut. So she chose her gut, every time. That's why, as an adult, Sigma females operate so independently. They don't chase mentors or look for someone to show them the way. They don't need cheerleaders to move. They build their own maps and trust their own compass, even if the entire room is going in the opposite direction. This psychological separation from the group isn't a performance. It's a refusal to compromise their inner world. It's why they're so hard to influence, so immune to peer pressure, and so uninterested in groupthink. That autonomy wasn't born from rebellion, it's their default setting, and the older they get, the more dangerous that becomes, because they can't be bought, persuaded, or controlled, only respected or left alone. Number 9. They experience early awakening syndrome. There's something almost haunting about growing up too aware, too early. Most people spend their childhoods in some version of emotional sleep, protected by innocence, distraction, or denial. But Sigma females often don't get that luxury. They wake up young, too young, to the hypocrisy of adults, to the performative nature of society, to the emotional undercurrents nobody talks about but everyone feels. This early awakening doesn't come with celebration. It comes with silence, loneliness, and the heavy weight of understanding things you were never supposed to understand yet. While their peers are busy playing games or chasing superficial validation, the Sigma female is already watching, analyzing, noticing the cracks in everything, relationships, authority figures, even themselves. This doesn't make them superior, it just makes them different. And that difference costs them. It isolates them from people their age. They struggle to connect with others who don't see what they see, don't feel what they feel. Conversations that others find exciting feel shallow. Social rituals feel absurd. Forced enthusiasm exhausts them, and often they're made to feel like they're the problem for not being more normal. This early awakening doesn't look like wisdom. It looks like discomfort, like overthinking, like emotional weight that doesn't match their age. It's the girl who can't explain why the world feels fake, why people seem hollow, or why she doesn't trust praise or attention. And when she tries to speak up, she's met with confusion or subtle rejection. So she goes quiet. Not because she doesn't have thoughts, but because she realizes no one's ready to hear them. But as painful as it is, that early awakening becomes her edge. It separates her from the crowd permanently. It gives her depth, discernment, and a kind of mental freedom others spend decades chasing. She doesn't need to go through a midlife crisis to realize what matters. She knew by 14. The world didn't awaken her. It tried to put her back to sleep, but something inside her refused. And that refusal, that inner defiance, is what carves the Sigma female into who she is, not shaped by time but by truth. Truth she saw too early, carried too long, and never forgot. Number 10. They're often born with a fractured sense of belonging. Some people are born with an easy sense of belonging. They slip into friend groups, families, school environments like water finding its level. But Sigma females? That feeling rarely comes. From childhood they carry a quiet, unexplainable sense that they're somehow outside of everything. Not rejected, not excluded, but simply not part of it. Like everyone else got a script they didn't receive. This isn't something they chose. It's not the result of some teenage identity crisis or a desire to be different. It's far deeper and quieter than that. It's hardwired, a kind of emotional detachment that starts young, not cold, not numb, but observational. While other kids jump headfirst into social roles and group dynamics, the Sigma female hovers on the edge, watching, analyzing, questioning the purpose of it all before she even has the words to explain why. This fractured sense of belonging doesn't come from trauma alone. It often begins long before any real damage occurs. It's a neurological divergence. Something in their brain chemistry makes them hyper-aware, hyper-introspective, and oddly self-contained. That's why they never fully merge with the crowd, even if they're invited, even if they try. Something inside them remains separate, quietly refusing to surrender their inner world for the sake of inclusion. Over time, this becomes their normal. While others bond over trends, groupthink, or shared experiences, the Sigma female is processing everything through a different filter. She's not emotionally wired to chase belonging. She's wired to chase meaning. And most social systems are built around conformity, not meaning. So she disconnects. Not out of superiority, but self-preservation. This can lead to feelings of loneliness, especially when they're young. They don't understand why they feel so distant from everyone. They just do. But as they grow, they stop trying to belong and start building a life that doesn't require them to. That fractured sense of belonging doesn't go away. It just evolves into their signature trait, the ability to stand alone, observe the world without being absorbed by it, and move with quiet autonomy through a system they never felt a part of to begin with. Number 11. Their isolation isn't a phase, it's a psychological constant. Most people assume that isolation is a mood, a phase, or a choice, something you drift into when you need a break from the world. For Sigma females, it's not that simple. Isolation isn't a reaction, it's a constant. Not because they don't like people and not because they're emotionally damaged or trying to be mysterious. It's because they exist in a state of permanent inner detachment that even they can't fully explain. This isn't standard introversion. Introverts pull away to recharge, then re-engage. Sigma females never really plug in to begin with. Even in a crowd, even in relationships, there's a part of them that stays untouched. It doesn't connect, not fully. And not because they're withholding, but because connection for them has never felt natural. It often feels like an act, a stretch, a translation. This internal exile isn't romantic or poetic. It's heavy, it's quiet. It can be beautiful in its clarity and brutal in its loneliness. It's waking up every day knowing that no matter how many people love you, admire you, or want to be close to you, there's a part of you they'll never reach. And that part, it's the one calling the shots. It's where your true self lives. Sigma females don't just spend time alone, they live alone, even in relationships, even in friendships. They might care deeply. They might be present, loyal, even loving, but they're never fully in. There's always distance. And not because of trauma or fear, though that may contribute, but because that's how they're built. Their minds are wired for sovereignty. Their hearts are protected by default. Their thoughts are layered in ways most people won't even notice, let alone access. You can't teach this level of separation. You can't fake it. You can't train yourself into it. It's not a defense mechanism, it's a design, a quiet, invisible wall that doesn't keep the world out maliciously. It just exists. And once you understand that, you realize their isolation isn't a flaw. It's the framework they move through life with, a permanent state of self-possession that no amount of closeness ever fully dissolves. Number 12. Made in fire, tempered by silence. Not every Sigma female starts out knowing who she is. In fact, many don't. What she is, at the core, is raw material. Deep sensitivity, high intelligence, intense perception, and a haunting need for truth over comfort. But those traits alone don't make her Sigma. What completes the transformation is what she goes through. And it's rarely gentle. She's made in fire. Emotional fire. The kind that doesn't just burn, it refines. Betrayal from those she trusted. Neglect where there should have been protection. Crushing expectations placed on her before she even understood herself. She wasn't asked if she wanted to be strong. She was forced to be. And not in a dramatic, attention-grabbing way. It happened slowly, quietly, over years. Each disappointment hardened her. Each emotional letdown stripped away her softness, until what remained wasn't bitter, but clear. She doesn't talk about it much. That's part of the Sigma code. Don't explain, don't complain. The pain didn't turn her into a victim. It turned her into a weapon, a silent one. She doesn't wear her scars like badges. She absorbs them, folds them into her internal world, and keeps moving. Not to impress anyone, but because stopping would mean drowning in everything she never got to say. The silence she carries isn't just absence of words. It's control. It's choosing not to scream when every nerve wants to. It's choosing presence over panic. It's not that she never broke down. She did. But she rebuilt in silence. And that silence became her armor. This is what people don't see when they meet her. The backstory, the invisible war, the years of emotional endurance that made her this self-contained, impossible-to-shake woman. They just see the result, the calm, the clarity, the strength. But she didn't get here by accident. And she wasn't born finished. She was shaped by fire and then tempered by silence so she wouldn't break the world back in return. Being a Sigma female isn't a lifestyle. It's a lived truth. It's not an aesthetic, a brand, or a trend. It's a blueprint written in emotional code, sharpened by absence, rejection, and raw experience. These women aren't simply strong or different. They're forged in silence, built through pain, and refined by clarity that most people never develop, even in old age. What makes them Sigma isn't just how they walk alone, it's why they had to. It's not a rejection of the world out of bitterness, but the quiet understanding that the world never really knew what to do with them in the first place. While others were molded by systems, validation, and belonging, Sigma females were shaped by what was denied: safety, softness, simplicity. And in the vacuum of all that absence, they built their own internal architecture, self-governed, emotionally sovereign, untouchable. They are not rebels. They are not misfits. They are systems unto themselves. They don't perform strength. They embody it in the quietest, most unapologetic way possible. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's depth. Their solitude isn't sadness, it's sanctuary. Their independence isn't showmanship, it's survival made elegant. Most people will never fully understand a Sigma female, and that's fine. She was never meant to be understood in the way the world understands things, through noise, explanation, or conformity. She was meant to be witnessed, from a distance, with respect. So if you ever come across one, don't try to decode her, don't try to tame or teach her. Just know this, she didn't choose this path to impress you. She chose it because it was the only one where she could stay intact, and that, more than anything, is what makes her extraordinary. If this resonated with you, really resonated, don't just scroll away, like the video to let us know it struck a chord. Comment below with your thoughts, your story, or even just one sentence that captured your truth. Your words might be exactly what another Sigma female needs to see. Share this with someone who's never fit in and stopped apologizing for it. Someone who walks their own road, even when no one claps for them. This content isn't made for the masses, it's made for the few who get it. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. We're building more than just an audience. We're building a space where the rarest minds can breathe, reflect, and recognize themselves. This isn't surface-level content. It's for those who think deeply, feel fiercely, and live truthfully, even when the world doesn't understand them. Welcome to the quiet power. Welcome home.